handout, and you didn't get one, raise your hand. If you want a handout and did not get one, raise your hand. There's a fine young gentleman who's going to be passing them out. How young are you? Can you turn me down just a little bit? Thanks. How young are you? A couple of things just real quick. Our fall focus is going to be coming up in October. I got a couple over here, Dennis, on the left. Our fall focus is going to be coming up in October. We're going to start that the second Wednesday night in October. Matt and I are going to be tag teaming that this year, and we're going to do one of our shows that similar to what we were doing while it's the Matt and Clay Hour. And we need a catchier name than just that. And we're going to do a show similar to what we did while we were kind of on lockdown. But this time it's going to be different. We're going to have a live audience. And so we're testing a few things this morning. One of those is going to be a remote camera. It's just working straight through an iPhone. So we needed to test that idea out to make sure that will operate correctly, at least the way it is supposed to. So far, I don't know if it's working or not. He hasn't turned it on yet, so at least I can see. So we've put a lot of work as a congregation. The deacons, Chris and Dennis and others have put a lot of work into upgrading the computer systems and the live streaming system and the internet yesterday. Dennis was here for a long time getting all that situated so that we got a higher and a wider bandwidth so that we can do a lot more streaming, uploads and downloads and all that good jazz. So we're very thankful to them for that. So anyway, that explains that. This morning, we've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to look at civil and religious government in the book of Luke and Acts. If you have a handout, there's a lot more on the handout than we're actually going to do. Sometimes we're just going to mention these things just so that you can see, hey, I never thought of it like that. Nothing that we're looking at this morning is new. Hopefully you'll just see it in a new sense and in a new light. And then we'll end up at the end looking at just some things that we can take away from the work of Luke and Acts and make some applications to ourselves in our situation. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's start with the book of Luke. The third gospel is dedicated to the most excellent Theophilus. The phrase most excellent actually is a term that is used later in the book of Acts to describe a government official. We don't know if he's using it in that governmental way, in that proper way. It'd be kind of like saying governor or senator or representative. We should assume, I think, that Theophilus is a government official on some level, that Paul is writing to him this third gospel, and then also the book of Acts. And if you got a question, comment, go ahead and throw it, but you got to throw your hand up high. Because, stuff like this, I'm an auctioneer, I'm thinking y'all want to say something. So throw your hand up high if you need to say something. So anyway, it's dedicated, presumably, to a government official. Let's see, the birth of John the Baptizer is foretold in chapter 1 and verse 3 with a political timestamp. It's in the days of Herod, king of Judah. In chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, Luke's going to tell us why Mary and Joseph happened to be in Bethlehem at the time that Jesus was born. It is because of a governmental decree that everybody had to be registered. So it's an act of the government that pushes Joseph and Mary from Nazareth down to Bethlehem in fulfillment of Micah chapter 5 and verse 2 that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Now Luke doesn't pull that out. I just included that there. But if we're reading the Gospel of Matthew, he does tell us that is in fulfillment of that prophecy. Luke's entire time frame at the beginning of John's ministry and then also Jesus' ministry is given to us with a political and historical timestamp. Look at chapter 3 beginning at verse 1. In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, his brother Philip, tetrarch of the region of Iturea, and Trachonitis and Lycinus, tetrarchs of Abilene, during the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, the word of God came to John, the son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. Now, I didn't count how many governmental officials he names there, but it's just one right after the other to give us the political culture and this historical timestamp so that we can better understand when these things are happening. Both tax collectors and soldiers flocked to John for baptism. Now, that might not seem like a governmental type statement, but these are governmental officials. Tax collectors and soldiers are the arm of the government, and they are flocking to John for baptism. Levi, we know him better as Matthew, is called by Jesus to be one of his disciples. And in turn, he invites other tax collectors, because Matthew is a tax collector, to meet Jesus. In that circle of people who are following Jesus and who will become his apostles and representatives, we have governmental officials. And then Jesus, when he is naming the apostles, he names Matthew as an apostle, a governmental official. But in the same troop of men is also an anti-government zealot, Simon the Zealot. He's anti-government, he's anti-Roman, and yet these two come together in collaboration for the gospel. Jesus heals the beloved servant of a centurion. Go with me over to chapter 7. This is kind of an interesting statement that is made here. And I'm just looking real quick. I did not think to cross-reference this, so I don't know if Matthew's the other gospel that records this, if he has this. But look at verse 1. And as Jesus finished all these sayings, this is as he finished the Sermon on the Mount, in the hearing of all the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick at the point of death and was highly valued by him. And when the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built our synagogue." Here is a Roman soldier. He is a centurion. He is not just a common soldier, but he is an officer in the Roman army in the detachment that is ruling this area. And yet he is beloved by the Jewish populace in that area. That's a really unique statement. Don't just read over that and say, oh, okay. No. For them to say he is worthy, that is a very heavy statement. Has anybody ever been to a Holocaust museum? There's one in St. Petersburg. Which one did you go to? Washington, D.C.? D.C.? Anybody been to the one in D.C.? Yeah. Sobering. Just to walk through that. I don't know what got y'all, but when I walked through the hallway with all the shoes, I just started crying. All it is shoes that were collected from the victims of the Holocaust. They're actual shoes. But there is a section near the end where, and I know I'm going to get the term wrong, but y'all who've been there, correct me. It's the hall of the righteous among the nations. That's it. The righteous among the nations. And it's all the Gentiles who helped to save Jews. I mean, it's just sobering, just to see that. If they were to use that same terminology back in the first century, this centurion is the righteous among the nations. That he is worthy carries that same kind of weight. And he is a government official of an oppressive government who refuses to oppress the people. Huge story there. Don't just read through it too quick. Jesus foretells in chapter 18, verses 31 through 34, he not only foretells that he will be put to death. If I'm not mistaken, is this the third time he does it? I think it's the third time he foretells his death. What makes this one special is that he says, and I will be handed over to the Gentiles. And so in that statement, he has to be arrested by someone. Who would that be? The Jews, because they're not the Gentiles. He's arrested by Jews. They're going to hand him over to the Gentiles, who are the Romans, and the Romans then would put him to death. That's a political statement. I know he's giving prophecy, but he's trying to press upon them, here's what's really going to happen, and the Romans are going. 26, I believe this is in all three of the synoptics. Jesus' question about paying taxes to Caesar. Jesus foretells the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Gentiles. Luke makes sure that we know the Gentiles are going to be doing this. Whenever you see the word Gentiles, particularly in this kind of context, you need to see the Romans are going to destroy all of this place. And so he is foretelling that. The chief priest in chapter 22, verses 1 through 6, the chief priest plot to kill Jesus. Now, we need to stop here for a second because we need to think about, all right, the chief priests are the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem and have influence in areas beyond. See, there are two kinds of government that are going to be talked about in the Gospel of Luke. A little bit in the first part of Acts, but particularly in the Gospel of Luke. And that is the civil government of the Romans and the religious government of the Jews. We don't get a lot with them when we're up in Galilee because they're just not up there. As we move south toward Jerusalem, then we're going to get these. And so when you read the word chief priest, what you need to read there is, here is a religious government official. And so the chief priests are plotting to kill Jesus, and then they pull Judas in with that. And so once they arrest him, they bring him before the council. This is the Sanhedrin. This is the governing body. This is the House of Representatives, or the Senate, or Congress, if you want to use the broader term. This is the Congress. This is the people who rule Jerusalem, who rule the religion of Judaism, and then have influence in the other cities of the diaspora all around. They pronounce Jesus guilty. Whenever we see a Jewish court or a Jewish person interacting with Jesus at the end here, he is always guilty. Okay? Got to keep that in mind, because when we come to the next, we find Jesus before Pilate in chapter 23, verses 1 through 5. And we might just run over there real quick. Let's get there. Jesus is before Pilate, beginning with verse 1 of chapter 23. And the whole company of them arose, and he brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding for us to give tribute to Caesar." That's paying taxes to Caesar, which he didn't say you had to do. Actually, he said you need to do it. And saying that he himself is a Christ, a king. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered, and he said, "You have said so." And then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea and Galilee, even to this place." When Jesus is before a Jewish court, he is always guilty. When Jesus comes up before a Roman court, he is always not guilty. Even though they level a charge against him, and Jesus affirms the charge that he is a king and that he is king of the Jews. That's something that we need to think about for just a moment. Who's the leader of the Roman world? Caesar. Who is king of the Jews? All right, who's the second king of the Jews? Herod. How did Herod get to become king of the Jews? Because Caesar said, "I confer on you the title of king of the Jews." Now, if he didn't really like you very much, but he wanted your political alignment, you might get to be a tetrarch. That's kind of a secondary king. If you were in a different position, you might be a governor. That's a step down from tetrarch with a smaller area. In fact, you go back to Luke chapter 3 and you see all three of those: king, tetrarch, and governor. For Jesus to proclaim himself as king of the Jews without the sanction of the Caesar is treasonous. And yet Pilate still says, not guilty. But then he learns that he's from the region of Galilee, and so he sends him over to Herod in chapter 23, verses 6 through 25. Again, here is going to be another governmental interaction. The word guilty is never mentioned there, but they do beat him and mock him, and then they send him back to Pilate again, and again, Pilate renders him not guilty. Now, we know all this. We know Jesus is not guilty. But read this through the eyes of Theophilus, presumably a government official. Read this in the broader sense of what we're going to look at Acts, where Jesus is not guilty of the charges that people have leveled against him, and neither is Paul, and neither are the Christians. It's a big theme that's going to be throughout Luke Acts. Let's see, just real quick. Jesus is executed by the Roman state, chapter 23, verses 26 through 49, just as he said he would be in that third prediction of his death. And then the last one that we get is chapter 23. And as Jesus is dying, we have one of the centurions who is watching over him, chapter 47. And when this took place, the centurion praised God, saying, certainly this man was what? Innocent. Whenever a Jewish court tries Jesus, he's guilty. Whenever a Roman court tries Jesus, he is not guilty. Or in this case, he's innocent. Now, all this governmental interaction spills over into the book of Acts as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just pull Acts into this. I know this is a class on the Gospel of Luke, but we're going to look at Luke's writings this morning because we get a lot more here. Now, I kind of got these segmented just a little bit to try to get some themes. Go ahead and turn to chapter 16 in Acts, as we're going to stop there. Again, Acts is dedicated to Theophilus. Peter and John are arrested. They go before the Sanhedrin Council. They have some government interaction. They are released because they say we can't hold them. Believers then, in chapter 4 and verses 23 through 31, they pray for boldness in face of governmental threats. They don't cower. They don't ask for them to be removed. They actually pray for boldness to face the governmental threats. That is a great prayer. Maybe spend some time with that prayer this afternoon. The apostles then are arrested again. The second time they're before the council and they are beaten, and then they are freed, and then they rejoice that they were able to suffer for Christ. Then we're going to find that Stephen is arrested. He's put on trial, and they don't like what he says, and so they kill Stephen. And then chapter 8, the government is systematically persecuting the church under Saul. We'll read about him a little bit later. And then, let's see, we get to chapter 8, because everybody's dispersed. Look at all these governmental officials who come to Jesus. The first one is the Ethiopian treasurer. We call him usually the Ethiopian eunuch, but he's a governmental official. He's in the court of Candace, the queen of the Ethiopians, and he is her treasurer. So he is converted. Then Saul, the secretary of governmental persecution, he is converted. Did you like that? I saw you laugh. Did you like that? Head of persecution. I loved it. Yeah. He is an arm of the religious government. And so he's converted. And then next we have a Roman centurion converted. It's 3 governmental officials in a row, representing 3 different governments. The Ethiopian represents the world abroad. Paul represents the Jewish world, and the centurion represents the Roman world. That's basically, from a Jewish standpoint, that is your 3 divisions of the world. There is your Jewish world, There's your Roman world, and then there's the world beyond them. And there was a world that extended beyond the Romans, and they knew about it. And that's all three of them are there, represented by their governmental officials. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Let's see, who do we got? Then Herod kills James. That's not good. Now persecutions come. We have another death. And then Herod tries to kill the Apostle Peter. And then God kills Herod. If the government interacts with my people, I will take care of the government. That's your message. I think I have that on another slide. Okay, here we go. Now we get to Philippi. Let's go to Acts chapter 16. I want to stop here and look through these points. All right, so Paul comes to Philippi, and we need to read, let's see. I couldn't find my Bible all week, so I don't have the thing circled and underlined like I normally do. And so we're heading out the door. Shelly's running around looking for something. She goes, "Oh, here's your Bible if you want it." I'm like, did you know where it was all week? She's like, "Look, if you can't find it, it's in a bag in the corner." So now I know. So I don't have it under. Where does Paul get to Philippi? I'm sorry. Somebody just yell out the... Is it verse 12? Yes, thank you. Let's start at 11. So setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace, and the following day we went to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi. Now Luke's going to tell us about Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia, a Roman colony. We remained in this city for several days. This is a Roman colony city. Now there's basically, at least from a biblical standpoint, there's three kinds of cities that we need to know about. The first one is your regular run-of-the-mill city. All right, that's all the cities except these special two kinds. Then there is your Roman colony city. That would be Philippi. Actually, I guess there's four kinds of cities. The regular cities, there's Roman colony cities like Philippi. There are temple guardian cities, which are the three that we're going to read about in Acts. Anybody know the three temple guardian cities? Who? Ephesus is one, really important story or city in Acts. Anybody know the other two? Corinth. All right. Anybody know the other two? Corinth. Athens. All right. And then there's one other one. It's so important. Huh? Starts with a J. Jerusalem. That's right. Jerusalem is a temple protectorate city. It's an important city. They have special status. So the Roman colonies are cities that are set up to house ex-Roman soldiers and ex-officials who actually made it to retirement. The temple protectorate cities are cities who protect the temple worship. They don't necessarily have to pay taxes. They have special privileges of self-governance. We'll see that when we get to Ephesus. And then there's the imperial city of Rome. And those are your four cities. And each one kind of will be interacting, and we'll see something very different about each one. So Paul is in Philippi. He's in this Roman colony city. He begins to... He's teaching. He casts out a demon. They get angry, the owners of this girl who was demon-possessed, and they lock them up, and they put Paul and Silas in prison. In fact, not just that they locked them up, they beat them severely, and they put them in the inner prison. They're all the way in the middle, and they put them in the locks. Probably not chained to a wall. They're probably in sitting position with their legs spread very far apart, very painful, and then locked up like that. And the claim is that Paul and Silas are teaching things that are not lawful for Romans to believe or practice. Look at the accusation beginning with verse 20. And when they had brought them to the magistrates, they said, "These men are Jews, and they are disturbing our city. They advocate customs that are not lawful for us as Romans to accept or practice. The crowd joined in attacking them, and the magistrates tore their garments off of them, and they gave orders to beat them with rods. And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. Having received the order, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. The charge against them is not that they've messed up our enterprise by casting out this demon from this demon-possessed girl, and now we can no longer kind of pimp her out as a fortune teller. The charge is they're teaching things that are not lawful for us as Romans to believe and practice. That would entail something along the lines of worshiping the Caesar, worshiping the gods of Rome, worshiping Roma herself. If you want to pull in the charges that the Jews had been levying, though I don't think this would be involved here because they're Gentiles not paying taxes. To say that we don't worship the Caesar is to say, I don't believe in Rome. I'm not patriotic. If I don't worship Roma, who was the divine embodiment of Rome, Roma, the female goddess. See, that's kind of an interesting thing. Whenever we want to embody something about government that we like, we put it in the form of a woman. Who's our town named after? All right. Good grief. All right. That is true. There's another level to that, though. Come down a level more to recent history. It's named after Columbia, who is named after Columbus. But who is Columbia? Yeah. She is the embodiment of America's spirit. Okay. Yeah, I mean, before the Statue of Liberty, if you wanted to talk about America, you talked about her as Columbia. Just Google that. Not right now, but later. Lady Columbia. And you'll instantly see all these, and you're like, I never knew that. I've seen that figure all the time in print. Now it's the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty is the embodiment of America. Roma was the embodiment of Rome. And you had to worship her. And you had to burn incense to her. And if you would not, then you were not a loyal Roman citizen, or you were not loyal to Rome, and they'd put you to death. So this charge, they're teaching things that are not lawful for Romans to practice, is leveled in a Roman colony made up of a whole lot of Roman citizens. It carries a lot of weight. And so Paul's in prison. They beat him. They put him in prison. The next day he says, hey, you can't do this to a Roman citizen. Citizens had privileges. They could not be beaten. They could not be flogged. They could not be crucified. Paul always used his privileges to get himself out of a lot of pain and discomfort. Always. And so he exercises his rights. He says, y'all have mistreated us. Y'all have perpetuated injustice. I want somebody to come before me and answer for what they've done. And so they come in very apologetic, very sorry. They're like, here's some gift certificates to the local restaurants. Get you something to eat on the way out the door. Here's the key to the city. Please leave and don't ever come back. We're so sorry. We'll never do this again. Because the magistrates who did this to Paul now could be in trouble and receive the same punishment on their own head. Let me go back real quick to that. That's a whole lot of government interaction in this one little section. Yeah. Yeah, you wonder why he didn't speak up a little earlier. Yeah, while he's getting beat. Yeah, he might. You know, I don't know. I think Silas, in that long list that's in your handout, I know I probably missed a few. I'm thinking Silas was a Roman citizen too, wasn't he? And that's mentioned, and I did not include that in the note. Verse 37, that's right. Verse 37, Silas is also a Roman citizen. Okay, in Ephesus, this is an important one as well. Paul is preaching in Ephesus, and he spends more time in Ephesus than anywhere else. And here he is so successful. The temples are emptied of people. People are not worshiping Diana. They're not buying the souvenir trinkets of the little figurines of Diana. And so one of the silversmiths said, look, we can't take this anymore. This fellow's turning the world upside down's come here also. And he starts a riot. And the riot makes its way to the theater in Ephesus. And for hours they just chant, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." Something to point out here, and this is repeated, I'm just using this one example, but you'll see this over and over and over and over again in the book of Acts. Luke is particular to show Paul and the other Christians never started riots. In the Roman Empire, what are the two main laws you have to follow? All right, three. What are the three main laws you have to follow? You've got to worship the gods. All right, what are the next two? Oh, come on, Blaine, you know this. Pay your taxes, and then what's number three, Blaine? Don't riot. That's the three top rules. Worship the gods, pay your taxes, and don't riot. We see that actually pulled out right here. So the riot's going on. They're in the theater. They're chanting, and Paul wants to go in and talk to them. Well, some of his friends, according to verse 31, persuade him, look, don't go in there. Even some of the Asiarchs, who were friends of Paul, sent to him, and they were urging him not to venture into the theater. Paul is friends with Asiarchs. Now, is anybody using the English Standard? You should have a footnote there at the bottom about the Asiarchs. If you got a printing that has the footnotes, it says these were high-ranking officers of the province of Asia. Paul's friends with senators, representatives in Congress. He's got friends in high places. And they urge him, don't go in there. And then, let's see. I think I got ahead of myself there. I did. Let's look. I want to read this last part. Let's look at verse 35 beginning. And when the town clerk had quieted the crowd, he said, "Men of Ephesus, who is there who does not know that the city of the Ephesians is the temple keeper of the great Artemis?" So he's kind of alluding to the fact that we're a temple protectorate city. "And the sacred stone that fell from the sky. Seeing then that these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rash. For you have brought these men here who are neither sacrilegious nor blasphemers of our goddess. If therefore Demetrius and the craftsmen with him have a complaint against anyone, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. But if you seek anything further, it shall be settled in the regular assembly. For we really are in danger of being charged with rioting today, since there is no cause that we can give to justify this commotion." And when he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly. The town leader comes to the aid of Paul. He comes to the aid of the gospel, and he says, look, the charges y'all are making are just not true. Paul didn't start this riot. Demetrius started it. And we're in trouble because, listen, I got to write a report tonight, and I've got to email that off to the Caesar, and I don't really have a good explanation for why y'all were breaking rule number 3. Don't riot. And over again, Luke is very particular to show Paul never starts riots. And that's important when writing to, presumably, a government official, because rule number 3 is, what? Don't riot. All right, last couple of last ones here. Paul's arrested by the Romans. I think I actually have this on a next. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Do what? Did they have? They probably did. Maybe at the beginning. But assembling like that in the streets against something of this nature was prohibited. So they just didn't have the same rights. Paul makes his way to Jerusalem. He's arrested by the Romans in the temple. The tribune allows Paul to speak to the crowd. Paul exercises his rights once again because it's not lawful to flog or to question a Roman citizen under distress. They're going to try to beat a confession out of him. Paul says, look, I'm a Roman citizen. And the tribune says, well, I am too. But I had to buy my citizenship. Paul says, well, I can one up you. I was born a citizen. And so they have a battle about who's the real citizen of the Roman Empire. Paul then goes before the religious council. Again, they're the governing body. Jesus tells Paul in chapter 11 and verse 23 that he will preach in Rome. So he's kind of letting him know the gospel is going to go to the imperial city. That's a big deal. The Romans protect Paul from a Jewish plot. The Jews want to kill Paul, and so the Romans protect him. Again, this just isn't about recording history and what happened. It's also about laying out these facts. Paul doesn't start riots. The gospel is not contrary to Roman citizenship. The Jews hate us everywhere we go, but the Romans are always protecting us. This is a story that has this underlying governmental current that's there that the people need to be able to see. Let's see, in Caesarea, which is the governmental headquarters of Judea, Paul goes before Felix, Governor Felix, and makes his case. Paul's kept in custody for 2 years. Anybody remember why Paul's kept in custody for 2 years? There's 2 reasons. He's taken down there to keep from being killed, and he goes in, and Felix wants to talk to him a lot, but he keeps him in custody. This is before the appeal, though. Before the appeal. That's right. Felix is a crooked government official, and he wants a bribe. But when he doesn't get a bribe to release Paul, he does it out of a political favor for the Jews and just keeps him in prison. Government intrigue kept Paul in prison for 2 years. And some people say that maybe this is when the prison epistles were written. Some people say they were written in Rome. Either way, Paul was very busy writing, teaching, meeting with people. He still had his freedom not to leave, but to be attended to by his friends and to meet people, and obviously he would have been there teaching. Paul then is promised another trial, and again he exercises his right, this time to, somebody said it, to appeal to Caesar. So he appeals to Caesar as a Roman citizen. You can go before Caesar and state your case. And then he speaks to King Agrippa and Bernice and Governor Festus. That's that famous line, "You almost persuaded me to become a Christian," is during that examination. And then Paul is taken to Rome. Oh, I'm sorry. I should put something here. I think I actually do have it in your notes. No, I didn't. Go over there real quick to chapter 26. Acts chapter 26. Look at, it's there at verse 32. Okay, there's 2 references. The first one is in chapter 25. Yeah, chapter 25, verse 25. This is, who's writing here? I forget now who's writing. I don't see their name real quick. Oh, Festus. This is Festus. He says to Agrippa and Bernice in verse 25 of chapter 25, "I have found that he has done nothing deserving of death." And then when we get over into chapter 26, after Bernice and Agrippa hear him, Agrippa says in verse 32, this man would have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar. That same thing happens. When Paul is before the council, the Jewish council, he's guilty, guilty, guilty. When Paul gets before Romans, he's what? He's innocent. He's not guilty. He's not guilty. That is true whether we're in Luke about Jesus. It's true whether we're talking about Paul in the book of Acts. That same current is going all the way through. Then Paul's taken to Rome under guard. And I don't have it highlighted here. There's several different currents that are running through that story. I think Satan is the one who's stirring up the storm to try to kill Paul. That's just me. Going back to Job, Satan stirs up the whirlwind and kills Job's children. I think that same idea is kind of going on here, though it's never mentioned. That's your Clayism for the day. Paul's going to Rome because God will keep his promises. He will preach in Rome. But also, and read it and look for the times that the centurion takes care of Paul. Did you want to say something? You did a halfway raise. You want to make something up? Okay, I'll come to you in just a second. And then Paul is under house arrest in Rome for 2 years, and that is how the book of Acts ends. In fact, that's how Luke's entire work, whether Luke and Acts, ends with Paul in the imperial city, and he's under house arrest again. He still has his freedom for 2 years, and then the story ends. Okay. Did you want to make your larger comment here? Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good. See, I knew there was some more that I missed. Yes.
And Jesus' comment is, unless you repent, you will all likewise perish.
Right.
And there's a generally true of the human race, but I think it is specifically true of the Jewish nation. And Jesus is the ultimate example of submission to the Roman government, because he doesn't resist even when he was down.
Right. That's right.
And so you have this whole idea that you can be a Christian, you can be godly, and still submit to the Roman.
Right. So just to kind of repeat at home for those who are watching and for those who didn't hear, Matt makes a comment. It's a really great comment. And he actually, you pointed out one that I missed. Luke chapter 13, verses 1 through 5 is another place you could put in your Gospel of Luke notes. There, Pilate kills some Jews and mingles their blood with their sacrifices. The moral of the story there, as Jesus presents it, is, look, you either repent or you will likewise perish. And the big overarching aspect of Luke Acts is that Jesus and his followers submit to Roman government, even to death. Jews rebel, and they will die because they do not repent, and their city will be destroyed and their temple will be destroyed. That's a good point. Anybody else want to make a comment before I launch into the last part? Yeah. Yes. Right. That's a good point. That the Jews in the New Testament, or particularly in the Gospels, are under the Mosaic law. And it's a religious and a civil law at the same time. And it conflicts in a lot of ways with the high priest, who is supposed to be the ultimate leader of the Jews, which actually is a political appointment by the Romans at this time. What I would say to that is, when you look at the prophets, particularly Jeremiah, when they are going into captivity, when they don't have their high priest, when they don't have their temple, and they don't have their law per se that they can follow exactly, they're supposed to pray for the well-being of the people that they are subjugated to. And they are subjugated here, and instead of praying for the well-being of the Caesar, they're probably praying for his death. And some of the Jewish people are forming different parties, like the Zealots, to kill Romans and to try to overthrow the government in the way that the Maccabees had done to the Seleucids and things of that nature. So there is a sense of conflict there. All right, real quick, just a quick overview. Yeah. No, not to my knowledge. They never prohibited it at all. Now, the Jewish Council does in chapter 4 and chapter 5, but the Romans didn't. Right, yeah. Let's see, God used governmental policies to bring about his will and to do good. That's something to just kind of keep in mind. God used governmental policies. The birth of Jesus in Bethlehem was because, I know of prophecy, but God used governmental policies in the fulfillment of that prophecy. In Acts chapter 16, as Paul and Silas are in prison unjustly, what happens? And particularly a governmental official named, we call him the Philippian jailer. He brought good out of this injustice that the government had perpetuated. Governmental officials over and over again believed in Jesus. Tax collectors and sinners, centurions, official persecutors, and Paul. Treasurers. There are two treasurers. I have them both in your notes. The first one is the Ethiopian eunuch, who is Candace's treasurer, and then Erastus, who presumably is the treasurer of Corinth. He is a city treasurer, but we don't know what city, but generally is believed to be Corinth. Leaders of the gospel appealed, other civic leaders. Dionysius, the leader of the Areopagite, or an Areopagite, that's a leader in Athens. He believes. So the gospel appealed to people in upper societal groups. As Christians, we can exercise our rights for our benefit and for the benefit of the gospel. Paul's constantly exercising his rights. Constantly. And it's getting him out of sticky situations. And we can use our rights that God gives us here in America or wherever we might be and use them to his benefit and to our benefit as well. Christianity wasn't a threat to civil government. That is a big thing that is related in Luke and Acts. Christianity is not a threat to civil government. Roman officials over and over again declared both Paul and Jesus to be innocent of all charges. Over and over and over again. The Jews condemned them, but the Roman civil government always said they're innocent. The gospel is not a threat to the Roman government.
Another one like that is Gallio.
Yeah.
So many.
Right. Yeah. Gallio, the leader in the Sanhedrin, says, "Look, y'all better leave these guys alone. This could be for." Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. Say it again.
Gallio, the Roman governor of Corinth.
Yes. Yes. He kicks them all out. He kicks all the Jews out and says, "Look, this isn't a matter that needs to even be brought up to the courts. Y'all go take care of this stuff yourself." And so we have that. Sosthenes was the Jewish representative that he kicks out, and then they beat Sosthenes. And then later, when Paul's writing to the church at Corinth, guess who he puts right up there next to him? Sosthenes. So the way I imagine it is, Sosthenes gets thrown out of the court. He's roughhoused quite a bit. He's laying on the ground. Paul comes over to him and says, "Hey, pal, I know how you feel. Let's go get a cup of coffee. I'm going to tell you about Jesus." And then he winds up writing the letter with him. The other thing, too, and this is repeated throughout Acts, I just gave the one to Ephesus, Paul doesn't start riots. All right, lastly, just real quick, I'll give this all to you. We need to be good citizens and live at peace with the government. Paul mentions that in Romans, he mentions it in Titus, and Peter mentions it in 1 Peter. We need to pray for our government. Paul tells us that in 1 Timothy chapter 2. And then we need to remember that our most important citizenship is in heaven. He wrote that to the Philippians, who were staunch Romans, who had given their entire working life to Rome. He says your most important citizenship is not in Rome, but it's in heaven. So, okay, thank y'all so much. I know that was a lot, but we worked through it as fast as we could.